Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the Grid Talk for this month. Today we're talking about method grid and managing residual risk and all things assurance and audit that goes alongside that. Very happy to be joined by Step 5, Ed, alongside us, who's going to be talking through how they manage that, and I'll give Ed a moment to introduce himself in just a moment. Before we do that, just moving on to what these sessions are. So for anyone who hasn't joined us before, I can see there's quite a few regulars that are on here, so there's a few who do know this. But for anyone who hasn't joined us before, these are our monthly sessions that we run primarily to kind of bring our community together, make sure people can discuss kind of key topics, and make sure we can kind of give back on the things that we've learned as we've kind of gone across various kind of implementations, client engagements, all those kind of things. So very much a kind of collaborative thing for everyone to get value from. Like I said, we run these monthly. Before I dive into this one, just a quick one whilst we've got attention, to say that our next one will be coming up at the end of May, where we'll be talking with SSE about the work they've been doing on a playbook within their SSE renewable space, primarily wind power generation. Massively exciting area for us to be in, part of that kind of clean energy transition, and a different type of playbook for us to run through as well. So do join that if you've got the time, and my colleague Tom will be sending out an invite link as part of the chat thing, I think, as we go through this. So yeah, do sign up for that. Quickly before we dive into introductions, if people haven't used Livestorm before, there's a route for people to ask questions, engage in chat. You should see those little tabs along the bottom of the side for you to click on. We'll make some time at the end of this session for questions, so if you want to submit them throughout this, we can make sure that we come to those at the right time in this. So yeah, do engage, do make sure you're kind of chatting along with that. Just quickly from my side, so I'm Sam. Hello, for those who haven't met me. I work in our professional services team, so I'm primarily focused on kind of helping people get the most out of our platform and helping them solve problems around what they're doing on projects and activities that they're running that with. We've got Ed with us from Step 5, who have been something of a long-standing client now, and primarily use this for assurance amongst other things. But Ed, if you want to give yourself an intro.
Yeah, sure. So Ed Arrowsmith, so I look after project portfolio and program management services for Step 5. So I'm one of those folks that generally gets called in when things are going a bit wrong, and so assurance is absolutely core to what I do. Thank you. Cheers, Sam.
Nice, thanks, Ed. Yeah, plenty of time to talk after this when we get into it.
Yeah.
Right, before we dive into the kind of assurance and risk topic, just a quick bit of an intro as to where it fits in with who we are. So to start off with, with Method Grid, we're primarily engaged in having a kind of project management AI powered platform that helps organizations manage how they do their activity. We work with a whole host of different clients across multiple different industries, but we do have a kind of coalition of clients in the kind of engineering, construction space and infrastructure space, and you'll see a number of those down the bottom. But obviously, there's the likes of SSE and others that haven't been called out there. And we're primarily set up on the basis of a kind of single problem, and that's that the poor delivery is something that happens far too often across projects and activities, and that there's kind of core reasons for that, primarily kind of inconsistency in how people are delivering, and that leads to a host of kind of pain points, which we've kind of listed out here, and we take people through in more detail when we engage with them on a kind of one-to-one basis. So I won't run through those now, but we do kind of four main things to help with that. One of them is helping people get clarity in what their methods, playbooks, kind of ways of working look like. And people are used to having a kind of, maybe it's a PowerPoint deck, PDFs, a SharePoint site that covers that. But what they often find happens is that kind of sits on the shelf, gathers dust, and that means that getting to compliance is somewhat difficult. So the second thing we help with is getting to the stage where people actually feel that they know how to engage with and use those methods. The third thing is kind of people capability, so all the things that are done with the people who have to engage with that method and comply with it to make sure that they're able to do so. So the kind of training, coaching, and kind of working with them to make sure that works. And for organizations that have worked through all of those and they're in a position where they've got it all right, in a perfect world, there'd be nothing left to manage, but we know we don't live in that perfect world. So there's always an element of residual risk that carries on through that due to just the uncertainties of the changeable world we work in. The bit we want to talk about today is this bit, and primarily it's about what you do in the kind of assurance space to make sure that we're in a position to catch those things when they're going wrong, catch them early before they can become fires, and work on them to kind of resolve those risks. From a platform perspective, for anyone who's engaged with it, you'll kind of recognize this, but just in brief, the platform we run, Method Grid, operates in kind of 4 modes. Number one is kind of building out those kind of methods, the knowledge that people have and how they work, into the kind of here's how we'd love things to work. If the world was perfect, kind of standard version of it, a master as we term it. And then the second mode is taking that master and tailoring it to the unique complexities and context of an individual project or activity, and then making sure that fits with how that's supposed to operate. And then the third mode is that's not just a kind of knowledge repository. It's not just something that allows people to kind of see how they're supposed to do it. It's also then the tracking tool that allows you to see what's on track, what's not, who's assigned to it, who's having trouble, where does all of that go, and it allows you to identify where you need to dive in and resolve different items, which is our assure piece, again linked to our topic for today. And then the enhance mode is kind of if you've learned all of that about what's working and what isn't working, where are people getting stuck, where are risks being introduced, it allows you to make sure that method that you've built can improve over time, because it's learning from all of those things that you're learning each time you run through it. And where that leaves us is that we're fundamentally about building out that knowledge in a kind of virtuous cycle. That means that every time you're using that knowledge, it's getting better and more effective for you and adding more value. The reason we bring that up is because we really do want to focus on that kind of point around how the platform and our work supports kind of managing that residual risk piece, and specifically assuring delivery. When we talk about residual risk, it's probably worth just hovering around kind of what we mean by that and what it looks like. Anyone who's been on kind of LinkedIn and Twitter will probably see these kind of stats popping up quite a lot. How many projects fail, and usually it's it's just a really big number. We've picked one here which comes from a KPMG survey, which says kind of 70% of organizations have suffered some form of failure in the last 12 months on a project. I think we often interpret that kind of failure as a big catastrophic failure, but I think the idea that 70-80% of projects are all catastrophically failing isn't really the case. What it normally means is that projects are failing to hit some of their main bounds, whether that's cost, quality, scope, benefits, against that. And there's one here from PMI which says kind of 27% of projects usually run over budget, which on the face of it feels like that's a relatively good sign. 3/4 of projects are hitting their budget. But when you start combining that with other factors, you get into a world where it's probably worse than that looks. This stat which Ed you provided from Oxford Analytics says that 8.5% of projects are managing to hit both time and cost. So massive reduction from that 70% who are on the cost piece. But when you bring kind of benefits into that, only 0.5% are managing to hit it, which is just a paltry amount to have to deal with, almost negligible in terms of who's managing to actually deliver on time, on budget, and the benefits. There's a stat here I had to include, even though it's not necessarily from one of the bigger houses on this, but just to kind of bring to life why that might be. And there's many causes for this, but if you just look at it as kind of where can you agree on things, where do people have the same understanding. This survey from Jenica said that only 23% of organizations could agree when their projects were complete. If you're trying to work out when it's on cost, on budget, and on benefits, and you can't even work out when it's complete, there's a major problem there to resolve. So there's a big problem around this point of kind of how much risk are organizations carrying when they're delivering projects. And one of the routes to resolving that is this assurance point, often coupled with its kind of cousin audit around this. And there's a few definitions out there, but we wanted to just take a minute or so to kind of align on the point that we think this is fundamentally about building confidence in projects and whether they're going to be achieved in line with what was expected of them. we're sort of putting audit to one side for this discussion and saying, whilst it's a key component of this, it's largely a tool that's being used to provide that confidence, and assurance is our main topic for today. And really what we're expecting when we look at that kind of confidence that the people are getting is that we're trying to answer some core questions, usually for those in kind of management and leadership positions. We've put a few here, not an exhaustive list, but kind of, am I going to get what I expected from this investment? Is it still the right investment to make? What interventions do I need to make sure that I'm going to get the success I expect? And if we operate in a mode where that's what we're trying to achieve, our first point is to kind of look at what the perceptions are across all those kind of parties that need to engage within that. And the first point to say is kind of, if management are looking for that confidence, they're usually expecting something that's kind of a thorough deep dive into how a project is progressing, how it's performing, and they're going to get some clear, actionable insights into what's expected against that project to make sure it can stay on track in the way that they need it to. But immediately we hit against a bit of a problem, because the perception on the project side is usually somewhat different. To take it to its extreme point, projects can sometimes see it as a homework checking exercise. Someone coming along who's adding to the burden of work that they have to do to establish whether they're doing their work or not. And you get to a point where people start to stage manage the work they're doing for the assurance function. So, you're not necessarily getting an honest view of what's happening because of those perceptions. Caught in the middle of that, you've got your kind of assurance function who are having to deliver to two kind of masters on it. They kind of suffer from two problems. Number one, they're often looking at kind of snapshot of what's happening at a point in time. And as we've already covered, that snapshot can be something of a kind of stage managed process. So they operate a bit like a spy plane going over. They get a view, but it's not a total view when it's just done from an audit mindset. The second point is that they're usually caught between a rock and a hard place. They're usually trying to maintain relationships in two different directions and keep everyone happy. And on the face of it, that's useful, because they should be working to both the project and management. It's about providing insights that can help both to improve things. But often what happens is you end up in a situation where those doing the assurance activities are sort of pulling their punches, or without realizing are diluting the message that the people pick up from it. So you don't necessarily deliver the value that you're expecting to. And if we take those perceptions as kind of a core kind of point as to where things potentially fall down, where we end up with is organizations that are focusing on kind of the wrong part of that assurance function. So when we take the 3 lines of defense, which we run through often on these sessions, usually organizations are focused on the 3rd line of defense, that independent audit, the regular check, that snapshot piece that we've just talked about. And that means that that's usually actually the element they put the most focus into delivering. And when you put that focus into delivering that, it becomes the be all and end all, so that all that happens is you end up with that audit function identifying kind of problems that need firefighting, because it's only happening at set points in time. In reality, where we need to get to is getting to a point where the 1st and 2nd lines of defense take far more emphasis in this. So those down on the ground doing the doing on a day-to-day basis are engaged in the assurance function on a kind of continuous basis, and doing it in a way that supports those activities, so that by the time you get to a kind of audit activity, actually that conversation is already ongoing, continuous improvement is in place, the oversight is there that allows risk management to happen. So a kind of core topic for this discussion really is, how do you get to an end-to-end perspective against that? One of the ways we help is on the kind of enablers. So we've got the kind of horizontals in there, but when you look at the kind of the enablers of getting to that point where people have the same understanding across kind of the people down at the bottom of that 1st line doing it on a day-to-day basis, and the people who come in and do those kind of audit activities against it, you need to be able to digitalize what that looks like. You need to be able to put down a core method in a platform that people can understand and comply with. You need to put the right things in place to make sure that people understand what's expected of them, and they're supported in meeting those kind of requirements against them. And you need the processes to be clear across all of those lines and all of those people involved, so that everyone can get to the same understanding of it and work in the same way. And if you get to that, you're in a position where you can really gain some value from this kind of assurance function. But the first point is kind of moving away from just focusing on that 3rd line. Ed, I think you guys have done a fairly good job of this. And the point of this discussion was to bring you guys in and talk to you about what you've done there to kind of make that happen. So I guess over to you for this bit.
Okay, thank you. So what do we do? So from a step 5 perspective, we basically act as a change agent that drives a whole host of transformation. What does that actually mean? I mean, we've got the customer at the center of that circle that you can see there. The reality is that we'd love to be in that prepare and work with clients all around, trying to make sure that they're set up for success when they come to deliver projects, programs, portfolios. Yeah? But invariably, what actually happens is we end up in that recover ring, and it's normally in the delivery stage. And that's because something has gone wrong somewhere along the line. So we get called in to say, can you come and help us? Can you get us out of this? Can you get us back on track? And can you make sure that at the end of the day, we don't continue to go off track in the future as well? And so assurance plays an absolutely key role as part of that journey. So if we can go on to the next slide. So lots of people from an assurance perspective go, if I go and talk to any P3M organization, typically I'll get, oh God, another ivory tower. I actually need time to deliver, not answer the questions. They don't trust me. What a bunch of homework markers. No value add. Yeah, I'm sure you've all heard the same sort of comments. We're not about that. Yeah, actually, we look at assurance as something that can go in, help and support the delivery of projects, working with the organization as a whole. So whilst, you know, I've got my definitions there of audit and assurance, assurance to me is providing that independent review of P3M delivery from the organization down. That is critical. The organization in which you are trying to deliver a project will either aid or hamper the success of that. Yeah. And what do I mean by that? So you can have organizations that are set up as a project-led organization, as a function-led organization. Project-led organizations, you know, both have their pros and cons, but at the end of the day, the project-led organizations tend to deliver projects better. However, at the end of the day as well, what you've got is a whole bunch of people that are actually operating in this matrix model. So the organization that you're trying to deliver projects in, first of all, you've really got to look at that. You've got to look at the stakeholder community as well, and how supportive that stakeholder community are. And at the end of the day, you've got to balance the risk versus the reward and agree pragmatic solutions to issues if identified. Yeah? And so some parts of the business may want to do things one way. The project team may wish to do things a slightly different way. Part of our role is to go in and also balance that risk versus reward, so that ultimately some of the goals that they're trying to achieve are actually achieved as well. So it then provides an interim or ongoing support mechanism. So assurance is not just about going in and doing this once. It's about making sure that the overall P3M function is set up to achieve success. And so the only way to do that is to make sure that you've got that ongoing support mechanism for P3M, and part of that is the assurance function. To the next slide, then what we've got here is, from a scope perspective, the stages that we go through when we come to look at assurance are, first of all, what's the scope? Now, invariably, we get called in because something has gone wrong, and that's the same for internal assurance functions as well. You tend to find that either the senior responsible officer or the likes of some director somewhere is going, this project is never going to deliver. Right, let's go and just have a quick deep dive on it. Yeah? The scope, therefore, tends to be centered around the project. What we actually need to do is expand that scope out, because, as I was just saying, you've got to look at this as a whole in terms of the organization and how it's set up to deliver the projects, not just the project. You've got to look then at discovery. So this is all about obtaining control documents, organizational processes. You've got to then do the evaluation of those. So now you've got a bit more background all around your organizational environment, how it's set up for P3M delivery, how it supports that. You've got more knowledge all around your P3M practices, because a project manager could be following P3M practices, but in reality, they might not be successful because of the P3M practices. There might be a whole host of bureaucracy in there that actually you could lean some of that stuff out. Once you've got to that point and you're confident in the process, then you can go into checking the compliance. Yeah? So are people following the processes, the templates that you've put in place? And that has to be based on those processes being good as well. And so at the end of the day, you end up with something that's enhanced. The enhance is all about agreeing and prioritizing improvements. And that might be improvements that come out of looking at the compliance of the project manager or the project team as a whole, but also looking at the overall processes. So if you find that the organization is not necessarily set up to enable projects to deliver successfully, then some of that enhancement might come into the organization itself or some of the business functions and business operations. There is, at that point in time as well, you can do this in terms of let's just make a bold step and a big change, but in reality you can establish a continuous improvement ethos, and that tends to work much better, because what you've then got is you're not changing a whole host of stuff around the project delivery team. What you're actually doing is you're incrementally changing and improving as you go, and changing the culture as you move through it. And culture, as we all know, doesn't change quickly. You then operate. So you've done some of those enhancements and you want to understand how things are going. So let's train, coach, mentor folks. Yeah. So this is giving them that ability. You need to provide pragmatic solutions to their problems, and that's part of assurance. A lot of people also view assurance as somebody coming in and telling them the problems. Unfortunately, most of our project management community already know what the problems are. What they want is help with getting the solutions and getting those solutions delivered so that they can be successful. And finally, you get into that embed, which is all about the P3M assurance and governance and the continuous operation. So I think now what would be really useful is to bring this to life for you. So let me just start into this. So this is our grid. And so what you can see here across the top are all of the phases that I was just talking to there. All right. And I think it's useful, and hopefully you can see this. I think it's useful for me to just dive into a couple of these, just to bring out some more of the points around this. So what we've got down here is obtain project and portfolio, structure, business and operational environment, and sponsorship. So this is, as I was just saying, it's all about looking at that program and portfolio structure. How does that interact with the business structure? How does that interact with the operational environment? Invariably, what you find is there is some tension there. Tension, not necessarily a bad thing, but if there is too much tension there, then it means that there is going to be some form of delay or some form of additional cost that's likely to come into the project. And that's where you have to look at the organization, and then there has to be a good conversation that looks at, do we want to deliver from an operations perspective? Do we want to deliver projects, or do we want to do both? And where do you want to place that needle? Yeah, because you've got to try and balance the two, so that when things keep on going wrong in operations, is there a point at which you say the people that we need from operations to support a project, then actually we can't keep pulling them off every time something goes wrong in the operational field. We need to keep them on the project to enable them to deliver something that at the end of the day will give you an overall deliverable. Now think of that as, and there was a colleague of mine a long time ago that said, Ed, you can keep pumping the water out the ship, and you will forever pump the water out the ship. Or alternately, what you can do is you can stop pumping water and go and patch the hole. If you try and patch the hole, chances are you might actually make it. If you don't patch the hole, then actually chances are you're going to get tired of pumping that water and you think your boat's going to go to the bottom. So I look at this very much on the basis of you've got to try to get the balance right between fixing the ship and then continuing to operate the ship. Your sponsorship is key. If you don't have good sponsorship to guide and lead the project when they hit an issue or need a decision, then that will impair their ability to move forward. The business organization and structure we've already spoken about, but there's more. There's obviously more to all of this. And when we talk about more, let's look at the architecture. So from a project management perspective, one of the common things that I hear is the project's going wrong. It's all down to the project manager. So we've already talked about the fact that actually it could be the organization and the way that the organization is set up, which is making their project invariably difficult to deliver. Yeah. And so what the other side of that is, though, is that you've also got a whole bunch of architecture. And so you have a solution architect that will always be working alongside the project manager. And the two have to work hand in glove in order to deliver successfully, because if they don't work hand in glove, then the project manager might deliver a solution, but the solution might not be fit for purpose, but they've still delivered a solution. Well, there you go. That's one of your benefits, your time, your cost that's gone down the toilet somewhere. The reality is that for a project to be successful, you've got to understand where that fits within the organization. You've got to understand, so that's the business side of it. Yeah? So the business architecture, which is the piece at the bottom. You've got to understand the high level architecture. Where does it sit in my enterprise architecture? Yeah? If you're going to build something, then ultimately you want to know where that component is going to lie at the end of the day. And then you've got to understand, if you're going to build an estate, as an example, then you need to know how you're going to go about building that estate and how you're going to put in place the likes of the infrastructure that needs to support the houses that you're going to put on that estate as well. And so building the house is only one small part. You need to understand the rest of it in order for the house to be in a position whereby you can sell it. Yeah? And it's the same, and I mainly deliver into IT organizations. I have stepped into real estate once or twice, but mainly into IT organizations, and we talk about solution roadmaps, and that's why I say this is absolutely key in terms of the architect, the project manager, hand in glove in order to be successful. So now we've got a number of different factors that will determine the success or failure of a project, as opposed to it's all down to the project manager and therefore it's their fault if it goes wrong. They do hold the accountability, but they're not necessarily in control of all the chips that are on the board. So now let's start to look at more around the actual evaluation. So we've now collected a whole host of information. We now need to analyze that. So another key role that you find in the portfolio management side of things is PMO. And PMO, everybody has a different definition, every organization, rightfully so. But from a PMO perspective, the PMO should be there to help, to guide, support. They're not an assurance function, but they are there to help. They're there to help automate processes as well. But you've got to decide whether they're there from a project support organization, a program management office, an enterprise program management office, and a lot of organizations struggle to understand. Everybody has this very woolly term, which is PMO, but they've got to understand where they're positioning that. Are they trying to look after the overall portfolio, or are they trying to look after the program that is being delivered, or are they looking after supporting the project managers? So then you'd get project support analysts. So it's key, therefore, as part of assurance, to understand how does the PMO fit into that delivery? Because that's another one of the key areas that will help drive success. Because if you don't look at it, then unfortunately, the project manager loses one of those support streams. And by losing one of those support streams, then that inhibits their ability to be successful. So let's just look at a couple of others. So on here, what we do is we actually evaluate the effectiveness of the governance practices, reporting and process. Yeah. So it's great, you know, I've seen organizations that have very lengthy governance processes, a whole host of gated reviews, and things just trip along, yeah, and they go through the gates. Yeah. The effectiveness of the gate is, or of a gated review as you're going through one of these processes, is that it's starting to pick up problems early. Yeah? And assurance is all about trying to make sure that the earlier that you can pick up the problem, the less costly it's going to fix it. Yeah? And so is the governance practice that is in place able to support that? Is the governance practice that's in place also able to drive decisions? And where, if you do start to go off track, how are they able to support? How are they able to escalate into the wider organization? And that's what this is all about. How effective is that governance? Because governance isn't just about sitting there on a project board on a monthly basis going, yeah, everything seems all right. It's more than that, as I've just said. So,
Ed, it'd be good to spend
yep.
a couple of minutes, I think, just talking through what this grid is and how you guys use it with clients.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So what we do is, as I've said, this is where we end up being invited to things that have gone wrong. We use this grid to help us understand what has gone wrong. And so by following this grid, we've got a number of checklists, we've got a number of documents. It helps us understand what we need to go and capture, how we need to evaluate it, and then ultimately how we can report out against it. So right at the very bottom here, what you see is reporting structure, and that happens at the end of each of the phases as well. And we give this, this is absolutely open to all of our project delivery teams. Yeah. And so this isn't about hiding what we're trying to do here. It's not about Big Brother, as I've said all along. Yeah. This is actually about, look, this is how we're going to come and try to work with you to assess you, but that's with a view to helping you improve, not with a view to basically saying, here's another problem that you already knew about. Yeah. And that's why this is completely open to all of our staff in step 5. It's also there so that if we wish to, we can also share it with our clients or potential clients to say, look, you know, this is how we go about things. This is how we look to improve our overall performance when it comes to delivering projects and how we recover some of those projects. So we've got this step-by-step process that takes us through that. And so it doesn't just rely on the likes of myself. It can be one of a number of my colleagues that can just pick this up and deliver using that, so they can deliver that assurance function. Likewise, we've got a whole bunch of grids that define project and program delivery, and again, those are all aligned with this grid as well, so that what we can be sure of is that the templates that we've got are also aligned to what we're actually trying to assess through this grid, which we see as the best practice. And that's the key from a method grid perspective, is to try to make sure that we've got all of this into method grid and aligned, and then we review it frequently, because feedback at the end of the day is actually really good. The feedback helps us improve, and that comes back to our own continuous improvement cycle. Okay. Does that help explain a bit more, Sam?
Yeah, common understanding, common basis for a conversation, you know, the common way of working. That means that it's not just a surprise audit that's coming along. It's a core understanding of how things work.
Yeah, because I don't want to turn up at the end of the day and, you know, surprise somebody. I actually want to turn up and help support somebody, because invariably you find that there might be some things that they could do better, but there's also a whole host of other things that we've already discussed now that would help them in their overall delivery, and they just need some support to help them get things over the line. So I'll just finish off going through this, and then we'll move back to the slides again. So we're now going into the reviewing of the compliance. So as part of the compliance, we look at the PMO operations as well as the project operations, and how mature are those PMO operations, and what's the effectiveness of the functions. So yep, we might have a whole host of processes, but are the PMO operating those processes? Are they getting the inputs? Are they getting the outputs as well in terms of reporting packs that would go into the likes of governance boards? So now moving off across here just a little bit more, then what we're now going into is all of the enhance. So whenever we're doing this with anybody, this is, as I say, it's better to do this incrementally. It is much better to move forward on an incremental basis as opposed to trying to do this big bang, because then you can build the buy-in of people. And if anybody's come across the ADCAR model, then you'll know that bringing people along on the journey is absolutely key. So from my perspective, we need to get people on board as we go through this. So we've built awareness, we've built some desire, we've given them some knowledge, and we've given them some ability, and the ability comes into the next section. But what we're trying to do here as well is really get to help them be successful. So this is all about, and again, we don't hide it, it's all about what is our improvement roadmap? How are we going to change things as we move forward, so that instead of the project manager, where this is being executed, turning around from and going, oh, here we go again, another set of practices. This is all part of the roadmap. So this is how we're trying to execute, so that we can improve your life, in effect, so that we can improve the way that you deliver, so that you can have a greater chance of success. So then we go into the operate, which is all about the coaching and the mentoring, and likewise then the embedding as well. And the embedding is, one of the key things. And I look at this and I go, support, train, mentor, that's the role of assurance. Yeah, we need to be there to go, right, now we've got some good processes. We know we've got some areas where we still might need to improve because of that continuous improvement path. Now that we've got those good processes, what we really need to do is get into the support, the training, the mentoring, the coaching via SMEs or via the PMO, and really start to improve the maturity of the organization, but likewise leave them with assets at the end of the day that they continue to utilize going forward. And that's why we keep on, we've documented all of this, we've got it as an asset ourselves, and that's why we can continuously refer back to it and use it. And then the other side of that is also working from a governance perspective to make sure that people attend and support monthly internal governance. So governance is, as I said before, where it all should come together and be supportive of the project manager, not just somewhere where you turn up on a monthly basis. Now, how do we bring that all back? So let's just go back to the slides now. So thank you. So are you able to move that on, Sam? Thank you.
There you go.
All right. So right. So assurance as an end-to-end activity. So plotting this over the model that Sam walked through earlier, what we've got here is we've got the scope, and that's very much in the governance section. But the scope is something that's set. This is where typically you end up in the infrequent assurance activity space, which is all of this over here. You'll see the top right hand box. We've got the discover, and then we've got the evaluate. Yeah? So I've just been through those, but that's an infrequent assurance activity. The reason it's infrequent is because this is, as I've said, it's all about trying to make sure that we're doing the right things, that the organisation is setting projects up for success. Once we've done that, then we've got to make some changes. So we've got an ongoing assurance activity then, which is, well, let's check our compliance against the current processes. Let's enhance them. Let's operate, see how they go, run through at least 2 governance cycles to make sure how if they're performing as we would expect, or if we need to make more change, and make sure that they're embedded before we go and make a further change. And so this is a continuous operation, so it's an ongoing assurance activity. It's not something that you turn up once and you just review a project and you go, right, here's a list of actions, and you turn up a month later and go, oh, right, okay, yeah, you've got 80% of them done. When are you going to get the other 20%? No, absolutely not. This is all about keeping that assurance going all the way through, and then continuously improving and driving the maturity up of the organisation and the project management that sits within that organisation.
Okay. It's starting from that position of you're brought in as the third line, but actually it's driving the improvements through the first and second that allow you to kind of not have to come back as that kind of thing again. Not be the voice of finding fires and moving to a point where it's self-sufficient.
Indeed. And the benefit of method grid is that we're not constantly, whoever turns up from the step 5 organisation, then you're going to get a different experience. The benefit of method grid is that actually you'll always get the same experience. So successful implementations from an assurance perspective are all based around that ADCAR model. It's thinking through, consider the constraints imposed by the organizational structure, embedding the knowledge from method grid. You need people to be pulling, so bring them along on the journey. It's much better that way. Pull them so that they will actually, and I myself have been in a position in the past where I've asked assurance to come in and review my program on the basis of, I'd really like to know if I'm doing something wrong here, because it's not going that well. Just tell me if I've missed something. And that's the sort of environment that I'd much rather be operating in. On the common pitfalls, what we've got is the accountability lies with the PGM, and hopefully what I've got across in the last half hour is that accountability does not necessarily, it lies with the PGM, but it doesn't mean that they're always to blame. It might mean that the organization structure, the technical delivery arm, they're not working in tandem. Projects are delivered by P3M professionals, technical experts who define the architecture and solution. So that's why I'm saying the accountability lies with the PGM, but actually you have to have those technical experts and the P3M professionals working in tandem. Changes in maturity are measured in months, not weeks. Because most people come along and they measure things in weeks and say, well, why haven't you changed? We've done this for a few weeks now. You've been on the pitch a few weeks, but nothing seems to have changed. No, because you can't change maturity in the space of weeks, especially in project delivery. And the perfect shiny tool set is of no value if it's left on the shelf. So pragmatism is much better than perfectionism. And the other common pitfall is that people, again, don't think of this as a journey. It is a journey. It's not short, but quick wins, as in continuous improvement, will keep your passengers engaged and on your buzz, as opposed to trying to go big bang, at which point you've got a hell of a lot to get over. Thank you. Okay. So, final slide from me, how the platform enables this at step 5. So what does it do for us? What it does for us is it gives us that one-stop shop, a place for the step 5 community to use, to collaborate. It makes sure that we haven't got surprises. So, I don't want to turn up and a project manager, program manager being surprised by the sorts of questions that I'm asking them. And because it's far better to tell them what you're going to ask them so that they're aware of potentially things that could trip them up. Because then they can start to guard against that and manage the risk. tailoring is key. Yeah, we created this model, but not with a view of trying to apply every single element in there to any project. Yeah, when we come along, we have to look at this and go, which of these elements is actually or are actually the right elements to try and use and to try to review, because not all of the elements are going to be a good fit for the review that's being undertaken and for the assurance activity that we want to carry forward. Consistency in process and template application drive the automation, reducing the PM effort. Yeah? And so this helps us at step 5 absolutely keep that consistency. So we have things off the back of this, which is called an insight platform, which gives us all of the reporting. And so provided that everybody adopts the same practices, the same processes, so that from an assurance perspective, what we can then do is get standardized reporting out. It's driven by automation and it reduces our overall cost in terms of delivery, but also gives us a near real-time tool. And then the final part is successful execution. We build on a structured, repeatable approach where lessons are learned and then incorporated. So again, I just refer you back to continuous improvement. Okay, I think that's it from me, Sam.
I think so too. Thank you very much, Ed. It was really useful.
Thank you.
I think we've got some time for some questions now. So like I said at the beginning, there is the questions tab to kind of put them into. Just checking. There's none at the moment. So if anyone's got anything, please do add it. We'll give it a minute or so for that to come through. I see Tom's been posting a few links. That's helpful.
Yeah.
Well, I can't see anyone typing, so maybe we've done such a good job at there's nothing to cover.
Indeed. Indeed. Let's hope so.
Okay, I think
food for thought.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll keep an eye on it just through this last little bit, but just to kind of finish that off. I mean, massive thank you to you, Ed. Just quickly from our side, there's a number of resources we offer to kind of help people with this, whether this be the assurance piece, the delivery piece, and we can get these sent through if any are of interest. So please do reach out if anything's helpful. But we've got the live pace grid, which is a read-only version of what a good grid looks like from Network Rail that allows us to kind of use that as an exemplar. There's a playbook white paper, which is really useful for this. It does cover this assurance topic, so there's a whole bunch of useful information in there if it's helpful. And we've also got a set of capability resources for if you're trying to build out that kind of assurance and audit function. You know, how do you go about that? What does that look like? What do you need to focus on? So again, if there's anything of use here, do let us know. I mean, of particular note is that within the platform now, we do have the capability playbook live to help people through growing those capabilities should they wish to. One last check on the questions. I can see. No, thanks, guys.
I haven't seen any, no.
Yeah, no, but just some nice comments. That's helpful. Right, so just to kind of flag again, our next session will be the end of May on the SSE use case, which should be a really interesting one with Stephen from that side. So do sign up for it if it's of use. The links should be in the chat now. So yeah, sign up for that. And I think it's just to say thanks to you, Ed, and thanks everyone for joining. So thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite and the time, folks. Cheers. Now.